Imagine you're at, like, a dinner party, right?
Okay.
You're highly educated, maybe you have a PhD, your grammar is flawless, your vocabulary is just, staggering.
Textbook perfect.
Exactly, textbook perfect pronunciation. And you start telling a story about your week.
Right.
But within, I don't know, maybe 40 seconds, half the table is suddenly looking at their phones.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
It really is. And the other half is just giving you that polite, glazed-over expression that basically screams, they stopped listening 3 sentences ago.
Yeah, the lights are on, but nobody's home.
Right. So why did your completely perfect academic English just completely fail you in that moment?
Well, it's because you treated a social interaction like it was a spreadsheet.
Yes. You delivered data, but you didn't know how to spin a yarn.
And that right there is the most common trap for anyone who has mastered a language in a classroom setting.
Because we're taught it's a science, right?
Right. We are taught that communication is entirely measurable. You memorize the vocabulary lists, you ace the syntax, and you are objectively correct.
But human attention doesn't really care about correctness, does it?
Not at all. It cares about narrative. I mean, the absolute definition of social fluency, that invisible thing we call charisma, it's heavily reliant on the architecture of how you deliver information.
Not just the accuracy of the information itself.
Precisely.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a stack of sources today that decode the specific, highly physical metaphors that the English language uses to describe storytelling.
It's a fascinating collection of idioms.
It really is. And for you listening to this right now, if you want to mesmerize your friends, if you want to command a room and avoid sounding like an audio textbook, well, this is your toolkit.
We're basically going beyond those boring vocabulary lists to look at the underlying cognitive science of it all.
Yeah, how we capture, manipulate, and release human attention. Okay, let's unpack this because the language we use to describe communication is just incredibly telling.
It really is.
Yeah.
We don't use dry clinical terms to describe a great storyteller.
No, we borrow imagery from, textile weaving.
And stagecraft and cooking.
Right, and even military artillery and boxing, which we'll get into.
And these idioms aren't just colorful little linguistic accidents, They are the structural blueprints for how human beings process reality.
So I want to start with the foundational material here. Before a story can thrill an audience, it has to be constructed.
You need the raw materials.
Exactly. Our sources point out that when a charismatic person sits down and begins a really long, highly entertaining, maybe slightly exaggerated story, we call it spinning a yarn.
Spinning a yarn, yes.
And I always assumed this was just a folksy, grandmotherly phrase about knitting sweaters or something.
Most people do, but it's actually nautical.
Wait, really? Nautical?
Yeah, it is intensely historical and deeply physical.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So to really understand why this phrase means telling a great story, you have to visualize the 18th century maritime world.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, so on these massive, long sea voyages, sailors would just sit on the wooden decks for hours. And their daily job was to take raw, short fibers, like hemp or flax.
And just twist them.
Exactly. Manually twist them together into long, heavy ropes for the ship's rigging.
That sounds exhausting.
It was. And these heavy ropes were literally called yarns. So the labor was grueling, it was slow, and just endlessly repetitive.
Just staring at the ocean, twisting fibers for 10 hours a day. I mean, my brain would practically rebel against that level of absolute boredom.
Well, the human mind cannot abide a vacuum of stimulation. So to survive the monotony, these sailors told stories.
Oh, okay. That makes perfect sense.
But think about the environment, right?
Yeah.
If you are trapped on a ship doing literally the most tedious task on Earth, you have zero tolerance for a boring anecdote.
Right, you don't want to hear about, someone buying a turnip at the market.
Exactly. You need the story to be expansive. You need sea monsters, impossible storms, massive exaggerations.
You need the story to counteract the physical reality of how bored you are.
Precisely.
So the physical act of creating the rope became completely fused with the verbal act of telling the tale.
Right.
But looking at the mechanics of it, I mean, spinning a yarn isn't just about length, right? It's about synthesis.
How do you mean?
Well, if you hand me a basket of loose threads, I don't have a rope, I just have a mess.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. Facts are like those raw threads. If I say to you, I went to the store, it rained, I came home.
Boring.
Exactly. Those are individual facts. They break easily, but the storyteller takes those raw, mundane threads and twists them.
Yes.
You weave the rain into like a threat. You weave the walk to the store into a desperate mission, and suddenly the narrative is much stronger than the sum of its parts.
That structural integrity is absolutely key. I mean, a yarn is engineered for strength.
Right.
In social fluency, we talk about this concept of narrative load. Like, how much attention can your story actually carry before the listener's interest snaps?
Oh, narrative load. I like that.
Yeah, so if your facts aren't woven together with cause and effect, the narrative is just too fragile.
It breaks under the pressure of a distracted dinner party.
Exactly. People go back to checking their phones.
But you can't just, walk up to a group of people and immediately start throwing heavy narrative rope at them, right?
No, absolutely not.
Like, you can't just yell and then the giant squid attacked without any grounding. Your audience will just look at you like you've completely lost your mind.
Right. Before the yarn can do its job, you have to build the environment it exists in.
You have to set the scene.
Yes, setting the scene. And if spinning a yarn is nautical, setting the scene is entirely theatrical.
Okay, let's break down the cognitive mechanics of this, because the source material uses this fantastic example of a disastrous wedding.
I love this example.
Right. So if I just walk up to you at a party and say, the wedding was a total disaster, the bride yelled at everyone, I've given you the core data,
True.
But it feels entirely flat. Why does my brain reject that as a good story?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's because you haven't given the listener's brain a place to anchor itself.
Oh.
Think about what happens in a theater before a play begins. The stage crew builds the set, they arrange the props, they adjust the lighting to cast, specific shadows.
And all of this happens before a single actor even speaks a line.
Exactly. When you listen to a story, your brain is actively trying to render a mental simulation of the events.
Right.
If you don't provide the parameters of that simulation, the listener is essentially floating in a dark, empty void.
They're spending all their mental RAM just trying to figure out where the story is even taking place.
Exactly. They're expending cognitive energy on orientation rather than immersion.
So they can't focus on the plot because they don't know where they are.
Right. So let's look at the wedding example again. To set the scene, you don't just give facts, you give sensory parameters.
Okay, like what?
Like, before I tell you why the wedding was a disaster, let me set the scene. It was 100 degrees outside, there was absolutely no shade, the catering truck was 2 hours late, and the bride's dress was incredibly heavy.
Oh, wow. Okay, my physical reaction to that is completely different.
Right.
Just by saying 100 degrees and no shade, you've introduced a physical sensation to me, the listener.
You feel it.
I do. You've introduced the stakes. The bride isn't just randomly yelling anymore. She is sweltering, hungry, and desperate.
Exactly. You are no longer processing data. You are inside the environment you built.
I have a place to stand. You have constructed the stage. The architecture is in place.
The listener feels grounded. And now, finally, they are actually ready to absorb the action of the story.
Right. But I mean, a beautifully set scene with a strong yarn is still just a static picture if nothing changes.
Really true.
Like, you can have the sweltering wedding, you can have the heavy dress, but if the catering truck eventually shows up and everyone eats and goes home, your audience is going to ask for those 5 minutes of their life back.
Yeah, that's not a story, that's just a report.
You have to introduce friction to get them invested. You have to heat things up.
And this is where we transition from the foundation of the story into the messy, complicated middle.
The messy middle.
Right. In English, we signal this shift by saying the plot thickens.
Okay, let's unpack this, because here's where it gets really interesting. This is a brilliant collision of literature and the culinary arts.
It really is.
The plot is obviously the sequence of events, but the thickening is straight out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
I always thought this was just a weird quirk of the language, but the physics of cooking perfectly mirror the psychology of a narrative.
Consider what happens when you reduce a sauce on a stove. You start with a thin, simple liquid, right? Like a broth.
Right. Easy to consume, but it kind of lacks depth.
Exactly. As you apply heat over time, the water evaporates. The physical volume decreases, but what is left behind becomes much denser.
The molecules bind together differently.
Right. It becomes heavier, it coats the spoon, and the flavor profile becomes exponentially more complex.
So, applying this to a dinner party anecdote, you start with a simple, thin broth of a situation.
Let's use the coworker example from the sources.
Perfect. So I say, John didn't come to work today. He said he was sick.
Okay, simple liquid, easy to digest.
But then I apply the heat of a new contradictory element. I say, I thought John was just at home with the flu. But then on my lunch break, I walked past that fancy coffee shop downtown.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right, and I saw John having a very intense whispered meeting with the CEO of our biggest competitor.
And there is your chemical reaction. The plot thickens.
Wow, yeah.
The storyteller uses this phrase actively to ring a bell for the listener.
It's a signal.
Yes, it is a psychological cue that says, hey, the baseline reality we established when I set the scene has just been fundamentally altered.
The variables have multiplied.
Exactly.
It demands a higher level of attention from you. You are telling the listener that the simple soup they were sipping is now a very complex stew, and they really need to pay attention to all these new conflicting ingredients.
But, and this is crucial, this introduces the greatest vulnerability for the storyteller.
Oh, how so?
Well, complexity is necessary for engagement, right? But it is also incredibly dangerous. When you thicken the plot, you drastically increase the narrative load.
Right. Suddenly there are multiple characters, shifting motives, background details to manage.
Exactly. And if the storyteller isn't a master of their own architecture, they run the risk of just buckling under the weight of their own complexity.
Which brings us back to the textile metaphor. They commit the ultimate sin of the amateur storyteller. They lose the thread.
To lose the thread. Notice how stark the imagery is here.
Yeah.
You are weaving this beautiful, complex tapestry. The thread is the central logical through line of your argument or your story.
And if you let it slip from your fingers,
the entire fabric unravels into a pile of meaningless string.
No, I hear people use this phrase all the time when they just, forget what they were saying, like, oh, I was going to buy milk, but the phone rang and I lost the thread. Is that an accurate use of the idiom?
I mean, casually, sure.
But is losing the thread just a fancy way of saying you lost your train of thought?
There's a crucial distinction to make there. Losing your train of thought is just a general cognitive blip.
Right.
It can happen in complete isolation. You walk into a room and forget why you went in there.
Happens to me all the time.
Exactly. But losing the thread implies a failure of complex structure.
Ah, structural failure.
Yes. It means you are actively building a connected narrative, and you voluntarily strayed so far into a tangent that the original foundation just collapsed.
The source material highlights this perfectly with someone telling a story about a vacation in Italy.
Right. This is a great example.
So the scene is set beautifully, the Tuscan sunset, the little village. The plot is thickening. They are lost without a map, trying to find the specific legendary restaurant.
And as a listener, you're invested. You want to know if they find it.
The listener is tracking the primary thread, the quest for the restaurant. But then the storyteller mentions the type of pasta they were hoping to eat. And suddenly, instead of continuing the quest, they pivot.
They go down the rabbit hole.
Completely. They start delivering a deeply researched 5-minute lecture on the 14th century origins of the noodle, the trade routes of Marco Polo, and the difference between wheat varieties in northern and southern Italy.
They have chased a secondary detail down a rabbit hole. They dropped the primary narrative thread to pick up a minor decorative string, and the whole tapestry falls apart.
And as the listener, the psychological experience of that is just agonizing.
Oh, it's the worst.
You are totally immersed in the Tuscan village, and suddenly you are trapped in a Wikipedia article about agriculture.
Right.
And the storyteller eventually snaps out of it and says, anyway, what was I talking about? But the magic is completely dead.
The charisma has evaporated.
Because the contract of trust between the storyteller and the listener has been broken.
And that concept of the contract of trust is so essential here. When someone listens to you, they're giving you their most valuable resource, their attention.
Right.
In exchange, they trust that you are taking them to a destination. When you lose the thread, you violate that trust. You strand them in the middle of a cognitive maze.
So how do the masters prevent this? How do you keep the audience from wandering off when the plot gets complicated?
Well, you don't just hold the thread, you tighten your grip.
You force the listener into a state of physical and psychological anticipation. You keep them on the edge of their seat.
And here we transition from the metaphorical to the viscerally physical. This is arguably the most literal idiom we are examining today.
I want you, the listener, to actually visualize your own body the last time you watched a masterful thriller or an incredibly high-stakes sports match.
Think about your posture.
Yeah, you are not sitting back. You are not relaxed against the plush cushions, casually breathing.
Not at all.
The tension of the narrative is so high that your body involuntarily reacts to the psychological stakes. You physically lean forward.
Right.
You balance your entire body weight on the front 2 inches of your chair.
Your eyes widen to take in more information. Your sympathetic nervous system might even trigger a mild release of adrenaline.
Oh, wow, really? Adrenaline?
Yeah. Your mirror neurons are firing, causing you to internally simulate the stress of the protagonist.
Yes. And what blows my mind is how this cinematic physicality translates perfectly to a living room sofa.
It scales down perfectly.
It does. You don't need a $50 million movie budget to achieve this. If you set the scene of a blizzard in the mountains and you thicken the plot by describing the flashlight dying.
And you hold the thread tightly?
Exactly. The people at your dinner party will literally stop chewing their food. They will lean across the table. They will physically manifest the tension of your spoken words.
It is the ultimate metric of social command.
It really is.
If your audience is leaning back with their arms crossed, you are just reciting an itinerary. If they're leaning forward, you own the room.
Right.
But possessing that level of control over an audience introduces a fascinating power dynamic, because a truly devious storyteller knows that once you have someone balancing on the edge of their seat, you have ultimate leverage.
You have them trapped, which allows you to execute one of the most frustrating yet effective maneuvers in human communication.
Leaving someone hanging.
Leaving someone hanging. The literal cliffhanger. We move from the movie theater to the jagged edge of a mountain.
It's the classic serial film trope. The hero is dangling by their fingertips over a 1,000-foot drop.
The villain's boots are walking toward their hands.
The fingers are slipping.
And the screen aggressively cuts to black. Tune in next week.
Exactly. To leave someone hanging in conversation means to intentionally build the audience into a state of extreme suspense. Pause right at the absolute climax of the narrative and flat out refuse to provide the resolution.
The source material provides a deeply relatable example of this.
Oh, the basement story.
Yeah, yes. So a friend tells you they were exploring the basement of their very old, newly purchased house. They moved a heavy bookshelf, and behind it, they found a small iron door locked with a heavy padlock.
Classic setup.
They managed to pry it open. You are on the edge of your seat. You ask what was inside, and your friend just yawns, looks at their watch, and says, "You know what? I have an early meeting tomorrow. I'll tell you the rest over coffee next week."
It creates a sense of literal psychological torment for the listener.
It really does.
It utilizes the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect.
Yeah, it's the psychological principle that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks much better than completed ones.
Oh, that makes sense.
By leaving you hanging, the storyteller ensures their narrative will dominate your thoughts long after the conversation ends.
I have to push back on this, though. I mean, we are talking about charisma and social fluency. Isn't this just being incredibly manipulative?
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't it just annoying to treat your friends this way? I feel like if someone did that to me at a party, I wouldn't think they were charismatic. I'd think they were a jerk.
It is entirely manipulative, but you have to understand information as a social currency.
Okay.
When you tell a story, you hold the capital. The audience desires the capital. By artificially withholding the resolution, the storyteller is demonstrating absolute dominance over the flow of that currency.
It's a power move.
It is a massive flex of narrative power. And while we might consciously claim to hate it, human behavior proves otherwise.
We do secretly love the torture, don't we?
We really do. I mean, we complain bitterly when a television season ends on a massive cliffhanger, yet it guarantees we will spend the next 6 months discussing the show.
Theorizing on Reddit.
Exactly. And ultimately returning for the premiere. We resent the manipulation, but we are undeniably captivated by it.
But only if we trust them, right?
Right. As long as the audience inherently trusts that you actually have a satisfying resolution, they will submit to being left hanging.
But eventually, gravity has to win. You can't leave them dangling over the cliff forever.
No, you can't.
The tension that you've meticulously built by spinning the yarn, thickening the plot, and holding them on the edge of their seats requires a massive physical release.
And we are moving into the final stage of the storytelling architecture, the impact.
The climax and the aftermath. And depending on the emotional resonance of the story, whether it is a grave drama or a lighthearted comedy, that release takes entirely different forms.
Right. Let's look at the dramatic release first.
So when you decide to finally reveal the massive secret you've been withholding, You don't just gently slide the information across the table. In English, we say you drop a bombshell.
To drop a bombshell. This is a sudden, violently destructive military metaphor.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
We've gone from the slow, methodical labor of weaving rope to the instantaneous devastation of high-altitude artillery.
Think about the physics and the timeline of an aerial bombardment. Before the bomb drops, there is a baseline of reality on the ground. Maybe it's peaceful, maybe it's just normal, everyday life. The buildings are standing, the roads are clear. And then, in a fraction of a millisecond, the bombshell hits.
It shatters the peace entirely.
The physical landscape is instantly and permanently altered. Where there was a building, there is now a crater. You cannot go back to the reality that existed 1 second prior.
Metaphorically, that is exactly how a bombshell functions in social communication. It is a shocking, unprecedented, and game-changing piece of information that instantly destroys the audience's baseline assumptions.
The sources offer 2 great examples of how this alters the social landscape. Imagine a corporate board meeting.
Okay?
The quarterly charts are up, the margins look fine, people are chatting about their weekend plans and packing up their briefcases.
The baseline reality is stability.
Right. Then the CEO stands up and calmly states, "I need to inform you all that our primary investor pulled out this morning and we are filing for bankruptcy at midnight." Boom.
A bombshell. The reality of everyone in that room has been vaporized in a single sentence.
Or take a more intimate setting from the sources. You are at a perfectly normal family dinner. You are passing the potatoes, talking about the weather.
The baseline is familial routine.
And your sister casually sets down her fork and says, "By the way, I quit my job and I'm moving to Australia on Tuesday." Boom. The peaceful dinner is shattered.
But I anticipate your pushback here. Does dropping a bombshell constitute good storytelling? Or is it just relying on shock value?
Exactly. If I just walk into a room and scream that the company is bankrupt, I haven't woven a narrative, I've just caused trauma.
Right.
It feels like the opposite of spinning a yarn. It feels like a cheap trick to get attention.
It's a critical distinction. In real life, dropping a literal bombshell of terrible news is not a narrative technique, it's just delivering tragedy.
Okay.
However, as a storytelling mechanic, when recounting an event that happened in the past, dropping a bombshell is about the controlled replication of shock.
Oh, the controlled replication.
Yes. The charismatic storyteller reconstructs the baseline reality for the audience first. They spend time setting the scene of that boring board meeting, lulling the dinner party into the same false sense of security that the board members felt.
Oh, I see. They deliberately build the mundane reality so the audience feels the contrast.
Precisely. They make the plot seem incredibly thin and boring, and then they drop the bombshell.
So the audience gets to experience the psychological whiplash of the sudden landscape change without the actual real-world trauma.
It is the ultimate dramatic release of tension.
But not every story is a tragedy or a corporate disaster, obviously.
Thankfully.
Right. If you are at a pub, you usually aren't trying to leave people stunned in silence. You are trying to induce an involuntary explosion of laughter.
Yes.
Which brings us to the comedic release of tension, the punchline.
And here we find another fascinating collision of metaphors.
Because the term punchline comes squarely from the world of comedy, but it is heavily infused with the physical aggression of boxing.
Exactly. A joke is essentially a cognitive magic trick. It relies heavily on the architecture we've already discussed. You have the setup, and you have the punchline.
The setup is pure misdirection.
Right.
The storyteller spins the yarn, laying down facts that lead the listener's brain down a very specific, logical, highly predictable path.
The audience believes they have correctly mapped the trajectory of the narrative. They feel cognitively secure.
But they are wrong. Because the storyteller is deliberately hiding the crucial variable in the audience's cognitive blind spot.
Yes.
And the very last sentence, the absolute final phrase of the joke, is the punchline. It swings out from the blind spot and literally punches the audience with an entirely unexpected perspective.
And the brain is so surprised by the sudden logical shift that it triggers the involuntary physical reflex of laughter.
It is an incredibly delicate cognitive mechanism. The timing, the tone, the exact word choice must be flawless.
And because it is so fragile, it is exceptionally easy to ruin.
Which leads to the absolute worst social penalty imaginable. The source material is adamant about this warning. Whatever you do not step on the punchline.
To step on the punchline. The imagery is clumsy, almost violent in its awkwardness. You are crushing the delicate mechanism underfoot.
It is excruciating to witness. We have all been at a party and watched this happen in slow motion.
It hurts to watch.
The amateur storyteller has the room's attention. They've set the scene. They are executing the misdirection perfectly. The audience is leaning in on the edge of their seats, ready for the release of laughter.
And then the storyteller panics.
Or they lose the thread at the critical moment.
Yes.
They get to the final crucial sentence and they fumble the data. They're like, and then the guy, wait, was his name Dave? No, it's Steve. Actually, it doesn't matter. Anyway, Dave turns around and says,
oh, the silence in the room in that moment is deafening.
the tension just fizzles out and drops to the floor like a dead balloon.
By breaking the rhythm, by injecting hesitation or explaining the joke prematurely, they diffuse the cognitive surprise.
The punch misses the target entirely, just grazing the audience's shoulder.
And the social agony is so real. The audience feels cheated. They allowed you to manipulate them. They allowed you to hold them in suspense, and you denied them the physiological payoff of the laugh.
The charisma of the storyteller doesn't just drop to zero, it goes into the negative.
It is a profound breach of the social contract. But let us assume you are a master.
Okay, let's assume.
You didn't step on the punchline. You dropped the bombshell perfectly, or you delivered the joke flawlessly. The tension has been successfully released. The room is echoing with gasps or laughter.
You still have one final architectural duty. You cannot just abruptly walk away from the table.
No, you can't just leave the wreckage of the bombshell or the echoes of the punchline hanging in the air.
Every narrative requires closure. You have to guide the audience's nervous system back to a state of equilibrium. You have to clean up the mess.
And in English, we describe this final act of synthesis with a beautiful visual metaphor. We say you need to wrap it up with a bow.
To wrap it up with a bow, we end our journey through these idioms with the highly visual, meticulous process of gift wrapping.
I love how orderly this is after the violence of the bombshell and the punchline.
It really is. You take all the chaotic, messy elements of the story, the thickened plot lines, the mysteries of the secret doors, the suspense of the blizzard, and you place them into a neat little metaphorical cardboard box.
You fold the wrapping paper precisely over the edges.
You tape it down securely. And for the final touch of absolute perfection, you take a brightly colored ribbon and tie a flawless, symmetrical bow on top.
In the context of storytelling, to wrap things up with a neat little bow means to conclude the narrative by resolving every single loose thread.
Right. So if you mentioned that the catering truck was missing in Act 1, the bow is explaining that the driver got a flat tire in Act 3.
It means answering all lingering questions and providing a clean, emotionally satisfying ending.
It's the happily ever after. It is deeply comforting to the human brain. We love when a mystery is perfectly solved.
However, the source material points out a massive, inescapable contradiction regarding this specific phrase.
Oh, right.
While our brains crave this perfect resolution in fiction, applying it to reality often causes friction.
Let's explore that contradiction, because if someone tells me a true story about a horrific breakup and then tries to wrap it up with a bow by saying, but honestly, it was all for the best and everyone is totally happy now, I immediately distrust them.
Exactly. When someone attempts to wrap up a complex, real-world problem with a neat little bow, it frequently comes across as reductive, inauthentic, or naive.
Like they're hiding something.
Right. Imagine a politician attempting to summarize a massive, multi-generational economic crisis with a single, catchy slogan.
Or a friend trying to distill a decade-long family feud into a simple misunderstanding.
It feels like they are forcing a perfect, artificial narrative structure onto a reality that is fundamentally chaotic.
Real life is messy. It rarely has a bow. It usually just has loose, frayed threads everywhere.
And that observation is the key to understanding this entire deep dive. We demand that our stories make perfect sense, that the plots thicken logically, and that everything is wrapped in a bow, precisely because our actual lived experiences do not function that way.
Wow.
We use the architecture of storytelling to impose order and meaning onto a universe that is inherently random.
That is incredible. So when we look back at all these phrases, spinning a yarn, setting the scene, thickening the plot, losing the thread, keeping people on the edge of their seats, leaving them hanging, dropping bombshells, delivering punchlines, and wrapping it up with a bow, we aren't just looking at a list of English vocabulary words.
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that we're looking at the foundational mechanics of human charisma.
The actual architecture.
Yes. We're looking at the toolkit you use to construct a temporary, orderly world, invite other human beings to step inside it, and guide their emotional and physiological reactions while they are there.
By mastering these concepts, you aren't just learning how to construct a grammatically correct sentence. You are learning how to manipulate tension, curiosity, and emotion. You are learning how to hack the human attention span.
There's an immense social power. The difference between someone who just reports data and someone who spins a yarn is the difference between being heard and being remembered.
So, to you, the listener, here is your immediate call to action. Take this architectural blueprint and test it out.
Absolutely.
The next time you are sitting at that crowded dinner party and someone asks you how your disastrous vacation went, do not just hand them a verbal spreadsheet.
Please don't.
Do not just list the facts chronologically.
Treat your reality like a narrative.
Yes, ground them first. Set the scene, give them the temperature, the mood, the missing rental car, take those raw facts and spin them into a tight yarn.
Introduce the complication and actively let the plot thicken.
Force your friends to the edge of their seats by holding onto the thread tightly, and whatever you do not panic and step on your own punchline.
And as you step out of the classroom and begin to practice this in the wild, I want to leave you with one final philosophical thought to turn over in your mind.
Let's hear it.
We just spent an hour discussing how real life is relentlessly messy and how we almost never get to wrap our actual problems up with a neat little bow.
Right.
Yet as audiences, we fiercely demand that the stories we hear do exactly that. We require the illusion of perfect structure. So the next time you find yourself at a party, entirely captivated by someone's anecdote, leaning forward on the edge of your seat, holding your breath for the resolution,
ask yourself a question.
are you truly enchanted by the objective truth of what happened to them? Or are you just falling for the brilliant, ancient, manipulative architecture of the yarn they were spinning?
Are you looking at the raw, jagged facts, or are you just happily caught in the web of a perfectly told story? It's something to think about. Until next time, keep weaving those threads.
So usually when we talk about communication, there's this expectation of just simple data transfer.
Right, like a computer network.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You think of it almost like, a computer network. You have a fact in your head, you package it up into words, you send it over to my head, and I unpack it.
Like it's supposed to be clean.
Right, sterile, perfectly efficient.
I mean, it is the great illusion of modern conversation. We really love to think of ourselves as these highly rational creatures engaging in this binary exchange of objective information.
You really do.
Yeah, the data transfer model basically assumes that words are just neutral vehicles for facts.
But then, you step into the real world. You step into the world of actual human storytelling.
Oh, completely different.
Right. Whether that's over a beer at a pub or, I don't know, a high-stakes corporate presentation, suddenly that neat little sterile model completely breaks down.
It falls apart instantly.
Exactly. We aren't looking at an objective exchange of facts anymore. We're looking at a landscape that is wild, it's emotional, deeply unpredictable, and honestly, highly manipulative.
Because it's a performance. The moment you move from simply stating a piece of data to trying to hold someone's attention with a narrative, you've entered the realm of theater.
Right.
The illusion of objective communication just falls apart the second you realize the speaker's primary goal isn't just to inform you. They want to make you feel something.
Exactly. I mean, having a great plot, having the most thrilling, action-packed sequence of events to share is just entirely useless if your delivery is flat.
Or monotone, or poorly timed.
Yeah, you could have discovered the cure for gravity, but if you don't understand the mechanics of how to deliver that information, your audience is going to be staring at the wall.
They'll completely tune out.
Right. Because storytelling is a live performance. And what we're going to explore today in this deep dive is the specific architecture of that delivery.
It's fascinating because to actually map out what is happening between a speaker and a listener, the English language doesn't use words related to logic or data.
No, not at all.
It uses a highly theatrical, surprisingly physical vocabulary.
Deeply physical, yeah.
When you examine the idioms and phrases we instinctively use to describe a storytelling performance, you find metaphors based on physical elasticity.
Right, rubber bands and stuff.
Exactly. You find concepts rooted in masonry and construction. You find raw biological imperatives and grand architectural destruction.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. These aren't just colorful phrases, They are precise psychological blueprints of how human attention works.
And our mission today is to hand you that blueprint, For you listening right now, we want to equip you with this ultimate toolkit so that you can command attention in any room you walk into.
And just as importantly, so you can analyze the stories people are constantly telling you with a much sharper, more critical eye.
Right. So let's get right into the foundational philosophy of this kind of storytelling. The premise we are working from starts with a very blunt observation.
Which is?
Every story begins with facts, but pure, unadulterated reality is usually a bit boring.
Oh, it is the absolute hardest truth for highly analytical people to accept.
Totally.
Reality, as it actually happens second by second, lacks the pacing, the rising action, and the dramatic arcs that human psychology fundamentally craves.
Because real life is just, well, a lot of waiting around.
Right. A purely accurate recounting of your day is going to include a lot of waiting in traffic, staring at screens, maybe some awkward pauses.
Yeah, lots of awkward pauses.
Yeah. If you are a slave to the 100% objective scientific reality, you are going to fail as a storyteller.
Because your primary duty in that moment is entertainment, not historical documentation.
Exactly.
So the very first step in performing a story is learning how to manipulate the truth, which leads us to our first mechanical tool, the concept of exaggeration.
Framed by this brilliant metaphor of elasticity.
All right, we talk about having to stretch the truth, but I want to push back on this right away, because isn't stretching the truth just a polite, socially acceptable way of saying we are actively deceiving people?
It sounds like it, right?
Yeah, like if I am altering facts for entertainment, I am lying to you. So does this actually work, or do people see right through it?
That is the exact tension we need to explore here. Cognitively, there is a massive difference between a stretched truth and a lie.
Okay, how so?
It has to do with the social contract between the speaker and the listener. Think about the physical properties of a rubber band.
Okay, got a rubber band in my head.
An unstretched rubber band, just sitting limp in the palm of your hand, represents that purely objective scientific truth.
It's just sitting there.
Right. It's accurate, but it has absolutely no potential energy. It's totally inert.
Right. It's the exact literal recounting of the traffic on the way to work. It's just boring.
Exactly. Now think about the physical act of stretching that rubber band. You take it between your thumbs and your index fingers and you pull it. The moment you pull it, even just a centimeter, it becomes tense. It vibrates.
Yeah, you feel the pull.
You are suddenly acutely aware of it because it now holds potential energy. When you stretch the truth in a narrative sense, you are applying that exact same tension to the facts.
You're pulling them a little bit.
Right. You are slightly exaggerating a detail to make the story funnier, or more dramatic, or more impressive.
But you aren't breaking the fundamental structure of reality, right? I mean, the rubber band is still a rubber band.
Exactly. The core facts remain intact. You are just heightening the contrast.
Okay, I see.
And this answers your question about deception. The audience actually wants you to stretch the rubber band.
Wait, they want you to lie to them.
Well, we willingly enter into a social contract when someone starts telling an anecdote at a dinner party. We know intuitively that they are highlighting the dramatic elements and minimizing the boring ones.
Oh, sure. Like skipping the part where you look for parking.
Exactly. We consent to this mild manipulation because the resulting tension is entertaining. Our brains reward us with dopamine when we hear a well-paced, dramatic narrative.
We prefer the stretched rubber band to the limp one.
We do.
But, there is an inherent danger in physics, and there's an inherent danger in storytelling.
Yeah.
If you pull a rubber band too far,
it reaches a breaking point.
Yeah, it snaps.
And it snaps violently. In our storytelling framework, that snapped rubber band represents crossing the line from mild consensual exaggeration into a blatant malicious lie.
And when a literal rubber band snaps, it actually hurts. Like it stings your fingers.
It really does.
It feels exactly like that in a social setting, too. There is a very real sting of betrayal when you realize someone isn't just entertaining you, but they're taking advantage of your trust.
Because the object is ruined, the trust is gone. Once you stretch the truth until it snaps, you experience a total collapse of your credibility with that audience.
Right.
Let's look at the classic universal example of this boundary line, the fishing trip.
Oh, the classic big fish story.
Yeah. A man goes out on a boat, he comes back, and he tells a story about catching a fish.
Right. Did he really catch a shark, or is he just stretching the truth about a large bass?
Let's analyze the elasticity there. If he caught a remarkably large, aggressive bass, something that genuinely surprised him and put up a fight,
Okay.
and he comes back to the dock and describes it as A shark-like monster that almost pulled him under the waves? Well, he is stretching the truth.
Right, he is pulling the rubber band to create a cinematic image for his listeners.
Exactly. The core fact, he caught a surprisingly difficult fish, remains entirely true.
And the audience at the pub knows he's exaggerating. They know he wasn't actually in mortal danger of being dragged to the bottom of the lake.
Right, but they allow it. They lean in. The tension makes the story better.
They are enjoying the potential energy of the stretched band.
They are, but let's say the reality is different. Let's say he didn't catch anything at all. Or, I don't know, he caught a tiny 3-inch sunfish.
Okay, the limp rubber band.
Right. If he then comes into the pub and claims he spent 4 hours wrestling a great white shark hand to hand.
The band snaps.
The band snaps.
The audience doesn't lean in, they roll their eyes.
Because the core fact has been abandoned entirely. The social contract is totally broken. He isn't entertaining them anymore. He's basically insulting their intelligence.
He's lost the room's trust.
He has. And once that rubber band snaps, it is incredibly difficult to tie it back together.
Okay, so we have this delicate balancing act of manipulating the facts for entertainment value, right? Watching that tension closely so we don't cross into malicious deception.
Exactly.
But what about a different kind of manipulation? What happens if a storyteller keeps the facts perfectly accurate, but they completely fake the emotion?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like what if their reaction to the events or their interaction with the listener is totally artificially inflated?
That requires an entirely different physical metaphor.
Okay, hit me.
When you stop manipulating facts and start excessively manipulating emotion, charm, or flattery, you leave the realm of elasticity and you enter the territory of masonry.
Masonry, like bricks.
Yes. You start laying it on thick.
Oh, laying it on thick. This is one of those idioms that is so deeply ingrained we rarely stop to think, but the physical imagery behind it.
It is a brilliant construction metaphor. I want you to imagine a bricklayer building a wall.
Okay.
They take a trowel, they scoop up wet mortar, and they apply it to the top of a brick before placing the next one.
Or, to bring it into the kitchen, imagine spreading peanut butter or butter onto a piece of toast.
Yeah, both work perfectly. Now consider the structural purpose of that mortar or that butter.
Okay.
If you apply a thin, even layer, it is perfect. It binds the bricks together seamlessly. It enhances the toast without overpowering it.
Right.
It does exactly what it is supposed to do structurally without drawing any attention to itself. A good brick wall doesn't look like a wall of mortar. It looks like a wall of bricks.
The mortar is invisible, but essential.
Exactly. When we translate this to human conversation, a thin layer of mortar is genuine politeness.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's a well-placed, sincere compliment. It is the basic social lubrication that binds our interactions together.
So if I tell you that you gave a great presentation this morning, that small layer of positive emotion binds our professional relationship.
Yes. But what happens when that bricklayer takes a massive oversized trowel and just starts slopping huge, dripping amounts of wet mortar onto a single brick?
Well, it becomes a structural and visual disaster.
It does. The mortar squeezes out the sides, it drips down the face of the wall, completely obscures the actual bricks.
It's messy.
It is messy, it's overwhelming, and paradoxically, applying too much mortar actually ruins the structural integrity of the wall. The bricks can't grip each other.
Wow. So in conversation, this is the person who just will not stop complimenting you.
Yes. Laying it on thick means using excessive, exaggerated flattery, drama, or emotion in a way that is so aggressive it becomes suffocating.
It is the conversational equivalent of slopping too much mortar on the wall.
It really is. And here is the psychological key to why this fails so spectacularly.
Why do humans hate it when someone lays it on thick?
It goes back to evolutionary threat detection.
Wait. Really?
Yeah.
Threat detection?
Yes. Our brains are highly evolved to detect artificiality in social interactions. When someone is laying it on thick, the obviousness of the manipulation triggers our cognitive alarm.
We can see the mortar dripping out. We know it isn't real.
Right. We realize the emotion is a tool, not a genuine reaction. Think about the classic example of a pushy salesperson.
Okay.
A salesman wants to make a sale, right? That is his agenda.
Right. Everyone knows that.
And if he uses a thin layer of mortar, a polite, that jacket looks great on you, the color suits you, it works.
A customer feels good, the social bond is maintained, the transaction proceeds.
But what if he looks at a totally average customer wearing an everyday jacket and throws his hands up and says, "Oh my goodness, you look exactly like a Hollywood movie star"? I have been working here for 20 years, and I have never seen anyone wear a garment with such sheer elegance. You belong on the cover of a fashion magazine right this second.
The mortar is everywhere. It is a total mess.
It is. And the customer's brain immediately processes that interaction and flags it as a threat. The customer knows they don't look like a movie star.
So they instantly know the salesman doesn't believe a word of what he is saying.
Exactly. And the moment you realize someone is faking their emotion, you immediately ask yourself, why?
Right. What's the angle?
Precisely. The excessive emotion reveals the hidden agenda. You think, why are you applying so much mortar? What are you trying to build here?
You realize they are trying to manipulate your ego to extract money from you.
Yes, the manipulation is so excessive that it achieves the exact opposite of its intended effect. Instead of building trust, it destroys it.
There is another example that feels even more universally human because it happens between friends or family.
Oh, the car.
This scenario where someone is trying to borrow a car.
Yes. Imagine a roommate or a family member who needs a massive favor. They need your car for the weekend.
Okay.
Instead of just asking directly, which would be placing a clean brick on the wall, they try to butter you up.
Oh, the buttering up. So they wake up early, they make you a totally average breakfast, maybe some slightly burnt eggs and toast.
Right.
And as you are eating, they sit across from you and say, you know, you are truly the most generous, brilliant person I know. And I just have to say, this kitchen is so lucky to have you in it. And by the way, how is your incredibly successful career going?
They are laying the charm on incredibly thick. And again, your threat detection system activates.
Because you know the breakfast is mediocre. You know you aren't the most brilliant person on earth.
Exactly. So the excessive charm becomes a massive red flag. The listener spots the giant trowel and immediately thinks, okay, what do you want?
And then 10 minutes later, when they finally ask for the keys to the car, it all makes sense.
The tragedy of laying it on thick is that it is a self-defeating strategy. If they had just asked for the car, you might have said yes.
Okay.
But because they tried to manipulate your emotions so clumsily, you are now defensive. You reject the request not because you need the car, but because you resent the sloppy manipulation.
Okay, so let's synthesize where we are. We have the mechanics of exaggeration. We know that if you stretch the factual rubber band too far, it snaps and you are labeled a liar.
Right.
We know that if you lay the emotional mortar on too thick, you trigger the audience's threat detection system and expose your hidden agenda.
Exactly.
So, assuming a master storyteller has perfectly calibrated their level of truth and their level of emotion, how do they actually deliver the narrative?
Well, this is where we uncover perhaps the most counterintuitive yet profoundly effective mechanism in human communication.
Which is?
When you look at the architecture of delivery, you assume the most powerful tools are words. The right adjective, the perfect verb.
Yeah, of course.
But the reality is that the most powerful, weaponized tool in a speaker's arsenal isn't a word at all. It is the complete and deliberate absence of them. It is silence.
The power of pacing. Because we aren't talking about the natural silence of taking a breath. We are talking about a very specific, highly engineered void.
A pregnant pause.
Yes, a pregnant pause.
It is one of the most poetic and psychologically accurate phrases we have. To understand the mechanics of this kind of pacing, we really need to unpack the duality of the word pregnant.
Because on its surface, it is a purely biological term. It refers to gestation, carrying a child, a state of physical fullness.
Exactly. But when it was adopted into literary and rhetorical usage, it retained that core concept of gestation and applied it to meaning.
All right.
In literature, to describe a moment, a look, or a silence as pregnant means that it is incredibly heavy. It is full of meaning or about to produce a massive result.
It is pregnant with possibility. It is carrying something heavy that is literally about to be born into the room.
Yes. A regular pause structural, you stop talking, you inhale, you start your next sentence. But a pregnant pause, it's entirely different. It feels thick.
Because it is entirely deliberate.
Yeah.
It is a highly tense, engineered silence placed right in the middle of a narrative flow.
Usually immediately preceding a critical punchline or a massive bombshell of information.
But why does it work so well? Why does silence suddenly command more attention than shouting?
It comes down to human neurology and pattern recognition.
Neurology.
Yes. As social creatures, we are deeply attuned to the natural rhythm of human speech. We expect a certain cadence. When someone is speaking, our brain falls into a rhythm of listening and processing.
We get lulled into the current of the data transfer.
Exactly. But when that rhythm stops abruptly, when a speaker just halts and holds the silence, it acts as a cognitive shock to the system.
A shock.
Yeah. Think about it. In nature, a sudden cessation of noise often signals danger. A predator is near. The birds stop singing.
Oh, right.
Our brains are hardwired to pay intense attention to sudden, unexpected silence.
The adrenaline spikes.
Exactly. The speaker is hijacking that biological response. By holding the silence, they are forcing the audience's collective brain to scream, "Pay attention! Something huge is about to happen the second this silence breaks."
It is the architectural support structure for a bombshell.
It is. You cannot just drop a massive piece of news casually in the middle of a run-on sentence. You have to build the runway for it.
Let's look at a deeply relatable scenario where this plays out.
Okay.
A tense corporate environment. Picture a boardroom. The quarterly results are in, and rumors of layoffs have been swirling for weeks.
Oh, high stakes.
Very. The CEO walks into the room, stands at the head of the long table, and opens the financial folder. He looks down at the sales numbers. He looks up at the terrified board members. And then he just stops.
He takes that heavy, agonizing silence.
Think about the alternative, though. You could just walk in, read the paper while walking to his chair, and immediately say, "Good morning, we broke the sales record."
If he did that, it would just be simple data transfer. It would be the unstretched rubber band.
Right. It would convey the facts, but it would completely waste the emotional potential of the moment.
It would be fundamentally boring. So instead, he utilizes the pregnant pause. He looks at the numbers, he looks at the faces of his team, and he allows the silence to stretch.
1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds.
And those 3 seconds feel like 3 hours to the people sitting at that table.
Because the silence is doing all the heavy lifting of the performance.
Exactly. During those 3 seconds, the board members' heart rates are spiking. Their minds are racing through every possible catastrophe.
Are the numbers terrible? Are we bankrupt? Am I getting fired today?
Right. The tension in the room becomes almost physical. The silence is gestating.
And then, only after he has built that agonizing, massive anticipation, the CEO lets a small smile form and he says, "We broke the record."
The release of tension at that moment is euphoric. The impact of the good news is multiplied tenfold purely because of the silence that preceded it.
That is the biological and literary power of the pregnant pause.
It is a masterclass in manipulating pacing to control the emotional state of an audience. The silence itself gave birth to a massive emotional reaction.
But this makes me wonder about the dark side of this specific technique.
Got dark side.
Yeah, we just established how powerfully silence builds tension and anticipation, right?
Right.
What happens if a speaker uses these tools, uses the pregnant pauses, stretches the rubber band, builds all that agonizing anticipation in the audience, and the bombshell never actually comes?
Oh.
What if you build this massive mile-long runway and no plane ever lands?
That is a phenomenal pivot because it transitions us into one of the most bizarre, uniquely English concepts in storytelling.
Okay, I'm ready.
When you build anticipation that deliberately leads to absolutely nowhere, you are no longer telling a thriller and you are no longer telling a comedy. You have entered the realm of a shaggy dog story.
A yaggy dog story. Yeah. I have to admit, even as someone who spends their life analyzing communication, this one always felt so strange to me.
It is strange.
Like, what does a messy, unkempt canine have to do with the architecture of narrative delivery?
Well, to understand the modern usage, we have to trace its origins strictly back to a very specific historical type of pub joke.
A pub joke?
Yes. It is essential to understand this origin story to grasp the psychology of the modern idiom.
Okay, take us back. Set the scene.
Imagine being in a crowded pub, maybe mid-20th century. A man stands up to tell a joke to the entire room.
Okay, everyone's listening.
Right. He begins to tell a story about a dog. Not just any dog, but a very hairy, incredibly messy, remarkably shaggy dog.
Okay.
Now, the subject matter of the dog isn't the point. The key to this performance is entirely in the execution. The speaker will begin to spin this twisting, incredibly detailed, labyrinthine yarn about this dog.
He starts laying down an immense amount of detail.
Hyper-specific detail. He will describe the exact route the dog walked through the village. He will recount verbatim the conversations the dog's owner had with the baker about a specific type of rye bread. And then a conversation with the butcher about a specific cut of mutton, and then an interaction with the local policeman.
And he doesn't just do this for a minute, does he?
Oh, no. He does this for 10, maybe 15 straight minutes.
15 minutes for a pub joke.
Exactly. Now, think about the cognitive load on the audience.
It's got to be massive.
It is, because they understand the social contract of joke telling. They assume the speaker is building toward a punchline, so they're actively listening.
They are trying to remember the baker's name. They're trying to figure out if the cut of mutton is a clue.
They are on the edge of their seats. The speaker is using pregnant pauses perfectly. He is stretching the truth. He is doing everything right to build anticipation.
So the audience is absolutely convinced that all these incredibly specific details about this hairy dog are going to culminate in the most amazing, structurally brilliant, hilarious punchline they have ever heard.
Exactly. They're investing massive amounts of mental energy into the narrative.
And then what happens? How does it end?
The story ends abruptly in an absolute crushing anticlimax.
Wait, really?
Or even worse, it ends on a terrible, completely unfunny pun that barely makes sense and has almost nothing to do with the 15 minutes of setup.
That is infuriating. That violates every rule of the social contract we just talked about.
It is entirely designed to be infuriating. This is where we get into the core psychology of this technique.
Okay.
The true purpose of a shaggy dog story is not to entertain the audience with a satisfying conclusion.
Then what is the point of speaking for 15 minutes?
The primary goal is to successfully, deliberately waste the audience's time.
Yeah.
It is an exercise in psychological trolling.
The psychology of the troll. That is fascinating and deeply sadistic.
Very.
The storyteller is extracting their entertainment not from making the audience laugh at a clever joke, but from watching the audience's faces completely fall when they realize they have just invested 15 minutes of their finite lives into a narrative black hole.
Exactly. The performer's joy comes from the manipulation itself. The punchline isn't the words at the end of the story. The punchline is the audience's frustration and anger.
It is an assertion of power.
It is. The speaker held the room hostage for 15 minutes, fully knowing there was no payoff.
So how does this bizarre pub joke translate to our modern, everyday usage of the phrase? Because I don't hear people telling literal stories about hairy dogs anymore.
No, you don't. Today, the phrase has evolved significantly. A shaggy dog story no longer has to feature a canine.
Okay, what is it now?
Idiomatically, it refers to any extremely long, rambling anecdote that demands the listener's attention but ultimately goes nowhere and has no meaningful conclusion.
It's the story that promises the world and delivers absolute zero. There's a great, very domestic example of this. The uncle and his trip to the supermarket.
Yes. Think of every painful family gathering or holiday dinner you have ever attended.
Oh, I'm picturing it.
Someone will say, "My uncle spent 20 minutes telling us a shaggy dog story about his trip to the supermarket, only to end it by saying he forgot to buy milk."
I can feel the visceral pain of that listener.
It's agonizing.
Let's unpack the anatomy of that 20-minute supermarket story, because this is where the theory of narrative structure meets the brutal reality of human interaction.
Okay, let's do it.
The uncle starts talking. He describes leaving the house. He describes the heavy traffic on the way to the store.
Right.
He goes into a detailed tangent about a new traffic light they installed on Main Street and how long the red light lasts.
Now you, as the trapped listener, are actively searching for the narrative hook. Your brain is trying to make sense of the data.
You assume, because of the social contract, that there is a reason he's telling you about the traffic light.
Did he see a horrific car crash? Did he pull up next to a celebrity at the red light? Did he get out of his car and dance?
Right. You are applying the rules of good storytelling to his bad storytelling. You are assuming competence.
Which is your first mistake.
So you keep listening. That he finally gets to the supermarket. He describes the squeaky wheel on his shopping cart in agonizing detail.
And then a long, mundane interaction with a cashier named Brenda about the price of oranges.
And again, you are waiting for the payoff. The tension is building, but not because the story is exciting.
No, the tension is building because the sheer length of the story demands a proportional payoff.
Yes, if you demand 20 minutes of my attention, you owe me a 20-minute quality ending. The ending needs to be spectacular.
Did Brenda try to rob the store? Did the squeaky cart explode?
Why do I know Brenda's name?
Exactly. You are experiencing the gestation of the pregnant pause, but stretched out over 20 agonizing minutes.
And then finally, after exhausting every aisle of the grocery store and detailing the drive home,
the uncle takes a breath, looks at you and says, "And then I got into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and realized I forgot to buy the milk."
and that's it. Story over.
All that investment, all that anticipation, all that cognitive load you carried trying to remember the traffic light and Brenda the cashier,
Yeah.
completely vaporized.
That is the essence of a modern shaggy dog story. It is a violation of narrative trust.
Which brings us to a very dangerous, critical pivot point in our analysis.
Why dangerous?
Because telling a 20-minute shaggy dog story requires a monumental amount of arrogance, or at the very least, a complete pathological inability to read the audience.
That's true.
If a storyteller fails to gauge their listeners, if they force a massive shaggy dog story on an unwilling crowd, or if they just keep arguing long past the point of reason, they enter the absolute most brutal phase of public communication.
They do. Because storytelling, fundamentally, is a dynamic exchange of energy. It is not a monologue, even if only one person is speaking.
You must constantly read the room.
And if you fail to read the feedback the audience is giving you, you're going to encounter our next concept, which is described as a grim historical equestrian metaphor.
Yes. Beating a dead horse.
Beating a dead horse.
To understand the raw futility and, frankly, the insanity of this phrase, we have to step back in time. We need to paint the historical picture of the horse-drawn carriage era.
Okay, I'm visualizing a muddy 19th century cobblestone street. A heavy wooden cart loaded with coal or goods being pulled by a massive workhorse.
Exactly. Now, imagine the driver of that cart. If his horse is being stubborn, maybe it's exhausted from a long day, or maybe it's frightened by a loud noise in the road, and it refuses to take another step, the driver has tools to deal with that resistance.
He might use a whip to encourage the horse to move.
Right.
It's harsh, but in the context of the era and the task, it follows a basic logic. The whip applies a negative physical stimulus to a living animal to force a reaction.
The horse feels the sting. It decides it doesn't want to feel the sting again, so it overcomes its fear or its fatigue and starts walking.
Right. There's a clear cause and an effect. The energy expended by the driver swinging his arm produces a tangible result in the physical world. The cart moves forward.
But the grim reality of this metaphor kicks in when the condition of the animal changes.
What if the horse is collapsed in the middle of the street?
What if the horse is actually literally dead?
Well, the situation is fundamentally changed on a biological level. If the driver stands over a deceased animal and continues to angrily strike it with the whip, what is he actually accomplishing?
Absolutely nothing. It is the definition of madness.
The horse lacks a nervous system to feel the whip. It cannot process the stimulus.
It will never, ever pull that cart again. The driver is just exhausting himself, expending all this violent, aggressive energy for zero return.
It is an image of complete and utter futility.
It is. Now, take that visceral image of the driver swinging a whip at a lifeless animal and translate it to modern human conversation.
Okay.
Idiomatically, to beat a dead horse means aggressively continuing to argue a point or dragging out a narrative long after the issue has already been resolved or the audience has completely understood your point and moved on.
It is continuing to swing the whip when the argument has already expired.
Yes.
But why do people do this? If the argument is over, why do we keep talking?
It usually comes down to ego or a fundamental misunderstanding of what resolution looks like.
How so?
Some people cannot accept that a conversation is over until everyone not only understands their point, but capitulates to their exact worldview.
Oh, that makes sense.
Or they are so enamored with their own analytical energy that they don't realize the audience has stopped listening. Let's look at two common illustrative examples that perfectly capture this failure to recognize that the horse is dead.
Okay, let's hear.
The first is a social scenario, analyzing a terrible movie.
Oh, I have lived this scenario so many times.
We all have.
You go to the theater with a group of friends, the credits roll, you walk out into the lobby, and everyone is in immediate agreement. The movie was awful.
Terrible.
The plot made absolutely no sense. The lead actor was terrible. The special effects looked cheap. You all look at each other and say, wow, that was a massive waste of time and money.
The consensus has been firmly reached. The topic is effectively closed.
The social transaction is complete. The horse is dead.
Yes. But there is always one person in the group who just cannot let the topic go.
There always is. They spend the entire 20-minute car ride home aggressively dissecting exactly why the third act failed structurally.
And then you get to dinner, and they bring it up again, meticulously pointing out continuity errors in the background of a scene.
They are still talking about the pacing of the dialogue an hour later.
And what is the internal reaction of the rest of the group?
Pure exhaustion. Everyone is sitting there thinking, we all agree with you. You won the argument an hour ago.
Right.
There's absolutely no need to spend another 60 minutes analyzing this garbage film. You were just beating a dead horse.
The speaker is expending massive amounts of analytical and vocal energy, swinging that whip, but they are getting zero reaction from the group because the audience's brains have already processed the information, stored it, and moved on to a new topic.
It's exhausting.
The second example is even more uncomfortable because it involves power dynamics. It's a workplace scenario involving an apology.
Like the manager already apologized for the mistake.
Yeah.
Bringing it up again is just beating a dead horse.
Or conversely, an employee makes a mistake and the manager won't let it go. Let's look at it from that angle, as it highlights the aggressive nature of the idiom perfectly. Okay, imagine a junior employee makes a real error in a report. The manager calls them into the office and confronts them. The employee immediately realizes what they did.
Okay, they own up to it.
They acknowledge the error, they take full responsibility without making excuses, and they offer a sincere, comprehensive apology, promising to fix the process.
The conflict has reached a mature resolution. The point was made, the lesson was learned.
Right.
The emotional and professional transaction is complete.
Exactly. But the manager keeps bringing it up. 10 minutes later, they walk by the employee's desk and remind them of how much money the error could have cost.
Ouch.
An hour later, in a team meeting, they make a passive-aggressive comment about the inconvenience the error caused the rest of the staff.
The manager is standing over the dead horse with a whip.
Yes, the employee cannot apologize more. They cannot invent a time machine and go back to fix the original error. By continuing to punish the employee and hash out the details after a full resolution has been reached, the manager is just wasting their own breath, destroying morale, and deeply alienating everyone listening.
Which perfectly bridges us into the absolute nightmare scenario for anyone who speaks in public.
The worst fear.
Because if you stand there beating a dead horse for too long, or if you trap people in a rambling shaggy dog story, or if you sloppily apply too much emotional mortar, you're going to trigger a catastrophic event.
You really are.
You're going to experience what is universally recognized as the greatest fear of any performer, teacher, or public speaker.
You are going to lose the room.
Lose the room. I think it is vital to unpack the specific phrasing here. It points out that this is both a spatial and an energetic metaphor.
It is.
When we talk about the room in this context, we are not talking about physical architecture. We aren't talking about the drywall, the ceiling tiles, or the square footage.
No, the physical dimensions are completely irrelevant. The room is defined as a living, breathing entity. It represents the collective attention, focus, and energy of the audience.
I picture it almost like an invisible tether. When a speaker is doing well, when they are perfectly stretching the rubber band and using pregnant pauses, there is a taut, glowing tether of energy connecting their mouth to the brains of every person sitting in front of them.
Exactly.
If you have the room, you are in total control of the collective consciousness of that space. Every eye is on you.
But if you lose the room, it means that invisible tether snaps, and it doesn't usually happen with people standing up, shouting, and throwing tomatoes.
It's rarely that dramatic.
No, it's a much quieter and arguably much more devastating phenomenon. It means your narrative became so boring, so confusing, or so socially inappropriate that the audience's collective brains simply shut off the receiver.
They have physically checked out.
They have.
It is agonizing to watch someone lose the room, and it is a cold, sinking panic to experience it yourself. What are the actual visceral, physical cues of this happening?
It is a gradual draining of kinetic energy. The most immediate cue is the breaking of eye contact.
Oh yeah, the shifting eyes?
People who were locked in on the speaker's face suddenly find the grain of the wood on the conference table incredibly fascinating. They stare at their own hands, they look at the clock.
And then, the ultimate harbinger of doom. The phones come out.
That is the universal modern sign of absolute defeat. When the blue glow of smartphone screens starts lighting up the faces of your audience, you have lost the room.
It's brutal.
They are actively choosing to look at a digital distraction, which offers an immediate dopamine hit, rather than expend the cognitive effort required to listen to the words coming out of your mouth.
There's also the whispering. You start to hear a low hum of secondary private conversations breaking out in the back rows.
Because the primary public conversation, your story, has failed to hold their collective focus. The hive mind has splintered. They are just politely waiting for your mouth to stop moving so they can go home.
Let's dissect the brutal example of this dynamic in action. The stand-up comedian.
A comedy club is the perfect crucible for testing this concept because a comedian lives and dies second by their ability to hold the room.
Right.
The example we are given is the comedian's first joke was great, but when he started complaining about politics, he completely lost the room. Nobody was laughing.
Let's really break down the sequence of that failure.
Yeah.
The comedian walks out onto the stage. The lights are bright. He delivers his first joke. It's sharp. It uses a pregnant pause perfectly. He stretches the truth just enough to make a mundane observation hilarious.
The audience erupts in laughter.
At that precise moment, he has the room. That invisible tether is glowing. He is the master of the collective energy in that space.
But then, emboldened by that success, he makes a fatal miscalculation in his pacing or his content.
Right.
He shifts the topic to politics.
Right.
Now, political comedy can work, but let's assume he does it in a way that is overly complaining, deeply aggressive, or just inherently divisive.
He stops telling a crafted story, and he starts beating a dead horse about his own personal grievances.
And you can literally feel the air pressure drop in the theater. The laughter stops.
And the silence that follows isn't a pregnant pause. It isn't gestating anything. It is a cold, dead silence.
It is the silence of 100 people simultaneously realizing they are no longer enjoying themselves and deciding they no longer care what this person has to say.
The comedian is still physically standing on the stage under the spotlight. The audience is still physically trapped in their chairs because they bought a 2-drink minimum.
Yeah.
But energetically, the connection is completely severed. He has lost the room. He's experiencing total crushing isolation despite being surrounded by 100 people.
It's a nightmare.
Okay, we have descended into the darkest possible timeline of storytelling right now.
We really have.
The rubber band is snapped. The wet mortar is dripping all over the floor. The horse is dead. The uncle is still talking about the supermarket, and the comedian is standing on stage, bathed in the cold blue light of 100 cell phones because he completely lost the room.
It's depressing.
It is. But we don't end there. We are moving into the final and most triumphant phase of our deep dive, resurrection and the ultimate victory.
Because the mark of a true master performer isn't just knowing how to hold a room when things are going perfectly according to plan, right?
Right.
It is knowing how to save a performance when things have gone terribly, terribly wrong. If a speaker finds themselves in that cold, dead space of having lost the room, they cannot just keep reading their notes.
They have to execute a massive energetic transition. They have to move the narrative from a state of death back to a state of explosive life.
And the English language gives us the exact dramatic vocabulary for this kind of narrative emergency. You have to breathe life into something.
Breathe life into something. The roots of the specific metaphor are incredibly profound.
They are. We need to examine the biological and mythological origins of this phrase to understand the sheer amount of energy it requires. This is not a subtle, gentle idiom.
It is literal, visceral resurrection. When I hear breathe life into, my mind immediately goes to the medical act of CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation.
Exactly.
Think about what is happening in that medical scenario. You have a patient whose heart has stopped beating. Their lungs are still. They are, for all intents and purposes, dead. They have absolutely no internal energy left to sustain themselves.
And what must the rescuer do? They cannot just stand there and talk to the patient.
No.
A rescuer has to physically press on their chest and then force their own breath, their own vital life force, into the lungs of the patient to artificially restart the biological system.
It is a forceful, exhausting transfer of vital energy from a living person to a dying one.
Yes. And beyond the medical, there is the ancient mythological imagery.
Oh, like creation myths?
Exactly. Across multiple cultures, you have these ancient myths of a creator god taking a lump of cold, dead, inert clay or dust. They shape it into a statue, but it's just mud.
Right.
To animate it, to make it a living, conscious human being, the god must physically bend down and breathe into its nostrils.
It is heavy, grand imagery. And applying it to a Tuesday morning marketing presentation might seem hyperbolic, but energetically, it is exactly what is required.
It is. Because if you have lost the room, your presentation is that lump of dead clay. Your story is the patient flatlining on the operating table.
You cannot save a lost room with dry facts. If the audience is looking at their phones, advancing to the next slide, and reading them another bullet point from a spreadsheet is not going to work.
The dry facts are the inert clay.
Right. To save the performance, you must perform narrative CPR.
You must infuse dynamic energy into the narrative. How do you do that? You transform the boring into the vibrant through sheer force of will.
You suddenly change the volume of your voice dropping to a whisper or rising to a shout.
You change your physical position, walking directly into the audience.
You abandon the slides and introduce a deeply personal, highly emotional, high-stakes anecdote. You have to shock the audience's nervous system back to life.
Let's look at two brilliant examples of this kind of resurrection. The first is an artistic one, involving a play. The script was completely flat, but the lead actress really breathes life into the character with her incredible performance.
Think about the mechanics of acting here. A writer created a character on a page. But let's say the dialogue is clunky. The words on the page are boring.
They are the unstretched rubber band.
Yes. If a mediocre, uninspired actress had read those words exactly as written, the character would have remained flat and dead, and the audience would have fallen asleep.
But this lead actress takes those dead words and she infuses them with her own massive internal energy.
She adds pregnant pauses where there were no commas written. She stretches the emotional truth of the scene.
She uses her vocal cadence, her micro-expressions, her physical blocking on the stage to literally animate the text.
She forces her own breath into the clay of the script, and suddenly the character feels real. She breathes life into the performance, and the entire play is saved from failure.
The second example shifts from art to organizational leadership. The new director completely breathed life into the failing theater company.
Here, the dead entity isn't a single character or a script. It's a macro structure. It's an entire organization.
Right. The theater company is failing, morale among the staff is entirely depleted, ticket sales have flatlined, the creative energy is gone.
The old director was probably beating a dead horse, trying the same failed, boring marketing strategies over and over while the company slowly died.
But the new director walks through the doors. They don't just bring new spreadsheets. They bring passion.
They bring a new, vibrant, radical vision.
They reorganize the physical space. They inspire the actors with powerful speeches. They launch an exciting, controversial new season of plays.
They act as the creator, forcing vital energy into the dying structure of the company, and suddenly is thriving again.
People are excited to come to work. The organization has been resurrected.
So imagine you are the speaker. You found yourself losing the room, but you executed perfectly. You managed to perform narrative CPR and breathe life back into your flat material.
You calibrated your exaggeration perfectly, ensuring the rubber band never snapped.
You used your pregnant pauses like a sniper. If you do all of this, you achieve the ultimate storytelling victory. You reach the absolute pinnacle of the performer's art.
And the English language represents this ultimate victory with the metaphor that is so explosive, so chaotic, it sounds like a catastrophic disaster.
It truly does. When a performer achieves total mastery over an audience, we say they managed to bring the house down.
Bring the house down.
I just want to sit back and observe the pure physical physics of this idiom. Because if you take it completely literally, it is a terrifying concept.
We have to deconstruct it as an explosive architectural and theatrical metaphor. First, we need to define the terminology. What is the house?
Right, what is it?
In theatrical terms, the house does not refer to a residential suburban home. It refers to the physical auditorium, the massive theater building itself, and by extension, the hundreds or thousands of audience members sitting inside it.
So the house is a much larger, grander version of the room. Earlier, we talked about losing the room, which was a quiet, sad, slow draining of energy.
Bringing the house down is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. It is an absolute overload of kinetic and acoustic energy.
Precisely. Imagine a performance that is so incredibly funny, or a piece of music so deeply moving, or a spectacle so visually stunning that the audience is driven into an involuntary frenzy of appreciation.
They aren't just sitting in their seats politely clapping their hands.
No. They are leaping to their feet, they are cheering at the top of their lungs, they are screaming, and crucially, they are stomping their feet on the wooden floorboards of the theater balcony.
The metaphor suggests that the sheer combined physical volume of this roaring reaction, the acoustic energy of the shouts hitting the walls, and the mechanical percussive energy of thousands of stomping feet creates such intense vibrations that it literally threatens the structural integrity of the building.
The audience loved the performance so much, they were so emotionally overwhelmed by the speaker that their applause is literally going to shatter the support pillars, collapse the roof, and bring the entire physical building crashing down upon their own heads.
It is a brilliant, beautiful exaggeration of cause and effect. The internal emotion of the audience is so powerful it manifests as a destructive physical force in the real world. Idiomatically, to bring the house down means to receive an overwhelmingly positive, roaring, sustained reaction of applause or laughter.
It is the absolute highest compliment any performer in any discipline can receive.
Let's look at two totally different examples of bringing the house down to see how universally this applies.
Okay.
The first one is the nervous best man. He was incredibly nervous about giving the best man speech at the wedding, but his joke about the groom's cooking completely brought the house down.
Let's track the emotional arc of that best man. He stands up. He is sweating. He probably fears he's going to lose the room before he even starts.
The audience at a wedding reception is a notoriously tough crowd. They are distracted, they are eating, they are drinking. Half of them don't know who he is.
He is holding the limp rubber band of his index cards.
But then he delivers the joke.
Yeah.
And he must have delivered it with absolute architectural precision.
He probably utilized a massive 3-second pregnant pause right before delivering the punchline about the groom setting a salad on fire.
He stretched the truth just enough to make it cinematic and hilarious without being mean or snapping the band.
And the result isn't just a polite chuckle from the groom's table. The entire reception hall erupts simultaneously. 200 people bursting into roaring laughter at the exact same millisecond.
The tension he built with his careful delivery is released in a massive shockwave of acoustic energy. He didn't just survive the speech, he brought the house down. He commanded the collective consciousness.
The second example shifts from comedy to pure musical spectacle. The singer's final note was so spectacular, she completely brought the house down.
This is a vital contrast because it proves that bringing the house down doesn't always require a punchline. It requires awe.
Picture an opera singer or a powerhouse vocalist. She's been performing a beautiful, complex song. She reaches the climax.
She hits a note that requires incredible physical control, lung capacity, and emotional depth. She holds that note, vibrating with energy.
She is breathing pure, concentrated life into the music. And the audience is frozen in pregnant anticipation, waiting for the resolution.
And when she finally cuts the note off, throwing her arms wide, the silence that follows lasts for about half a second.
And then the auditorium absolutely explodes. The audience leaps to their feet as a single organism. The bravos, the deafening clapping, the stamping of shoes.
The architectural limits of the concert hall are genuinely tested by the sheer volume of their appreciation. That is the apex of human communication. That is what it means to be a master of the performance.
Wow. Okay, let's take a deep breath and zoom out here, because we have covered a massive amount of conceptual and psychological ground today.
We truly have.
We have essentially charted the complete emotional heartbeat of human entertainment.
We moved through a complete vast spectrum of communication dynamics, decoding the hidden architecture behind how we speak to one another.
We started with the delicate elasticity of truth, exploring the cognitive dissonance of why we prefer a stretched rubber band to a limp, boring reality, and identifying the exact breaking point where entertainment snaps into malicious deception.
We navigated the heavy masonry of human emotion, understanding the evolutionary threat detection alarms that go off when someone lays their charm or their flattery on too thick with a massive trowel.
We explored the incredible biological power of the pregnant pause, learning how to hijack the human nervous system to weaponize silence and build agonizing anticipation.
And we looked at the dark, sadistic side of that anticipation, the deliberate trolling and cognitive overload of trapping an audience in a rambling, shaggy dog story.
We visited the grim equestrian metaphor of beating a dead horse, examining the ego-driven futility of wasting our energy on arguments that have already achieved resolution.
We felt the visceral, agonizing panic of losing the room, watching the invisible tether snap as our audience vanishes into the blue glow of their cell phones.
But we also learned the mechanics of resurrection. We learned how to perform narrative CPR, breathing vital, dynamic energy into dead, flat clay to save a failing performance or a dying organization.
And finally, we ended in the glorious, chaotic destruction of ultimate victory, where a perfectly delivered punchline or a spectacular final note generates enough roaring kinetic energy to literally bring the physical house down around us.
It is a remarkable structural toolkit, and I want to reiterate to you, the listener, exactly why mastering this specific vocabulary and understanding the psychology behind it is so crucial for your own life.
Yes. Why does all of this architectural and biological theory matter to the person listening right now who maybe isn't a stand-up comedian or a CEO?
Exactly.
Because understanding these concepts gives you a sort of X-ray vision into human attention.
I love that. X-ray vision.
When you sit down at your next dinner party or when you stand up to give a standard update at a Tuesday morning meeting, You won't just be blindly throwing raw data at your audience, hoping some of it sticks.
You will be reading the room. You will feel the tension in the rubber band in your hands.
You will know exactly when to hold that heavy, pregnant pause to maximize the impact of your point, and you will recognize the exact moment to stop talking before you start beating a dead horse.
You elevate yourself from a passive participant in a conversation into an active architect of the room's energy.
Exactly. You transition from someone who merely recounts events to someone who truly understands how to command the human mind. You become a master storyteller.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we let you go back to the real world, our expert has a final, somewhat unsettling thought for you to mull over.
I do.
Something to chew on the next time you're having a totally normal conversation with a friend or a colleague.
Yes. Throughout this entire psychological analysis of our source material, a very clear, perhaps slightly uncomfortable pattern has emerged regarding the vocabulary we use to describe excellent communication.
Stretching the truth. Laying on thick mortar. Trolling an audience with a shaggy dog.
Weaponizing silence to spike adrenaline with a pregnant pause. Every single one of these techniques, the tools we use to be charismatic, is fundamentally a form of deliberate manipulation.
It's all just an intricate psychological trick.
It is. The speaker is actively distorting reality, pacing, or emotion to control the neurochemistry and the emotional state of the listener.
So what's the question?
My provocative question for you to explore on your own is this. If the very language and mechanics we use to define a great communicator are entirely based on techniques of manipulation and theatrical distortion, at what point does our everyday conversation stop being a simple exchange of facts and start becoming pure theater?
Wow.
Are we ever truly just transferring data to one another, or are we all always just performing for each other, trying desperately not to lose the room?
It makes you look at that messy, manipulative landscape of human interaction in a whole new light, doesn't it?
It really does.
The sterile, perfect data transfer model is definitely a myth. We're all just actors on a stage, hoping our rubber bands don't snap before we can bring the house down. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will catch you on the next one.